Good afternoon and a warm welcome to our European strategy discussion. I'm very honored to be able to moderate this discussion, and it is a pleasure to introduce our guest. We're still missing one. I think it's Fabrice, but let's hope that he is going to join us very shortly. So let me introduce our guest. It's Erlend Bjørtvedt, who is the CEO of Corisk. He's with us today. Very happy to see you. We also have Aron Emilsson with us today, who is member of the Sweden Democrats and the chair of the Committee of Foreign Affairs in the Swedish Parliament. So thank you for being with us. Marketa Gregorova is with us, who is member of the European Parliament for the Czech Pirate Party. So I'm very looking forward to our discussion today. As I said, Fabrice Potier is missing. Hopefully he will join us, but Nicolas Tenzer is with us. He is the chairman of Center for Studies and Research on Political Decision. Thank you for being with us. Klaus Weller is here, chairman of the Academic Council at the Martin Center for European Studies. Welcome to you as well. And good to see you, Fabrice Potier, the CEO of Rasmussen Global. I hope you had a great coffee break and you're ready for our discussion. And of course, the key question here is how Europe can become a truly important geopolitical actor. And I would like to start with Fabrice, with you, to punish you because you were late. No. No, but to answer that question.
Some apologies to be late. Yes, I think it's well.
No, but I didn't ask my question, so.
I thought it was the big question.
Yeah, so let me start with you. And the question, on a scale from 1 to 10, and 10 meaning, yes, Europe is a very important actor on the international stage, and 1 meaning Europe is still a sleeping beauty. What's your assessment? Where do we stand?
Oh my God! On a scale of 1 to 10, I think in terms of reality, if you look at critical indicators like where Europe's AI capacity is, where Europe's capacity to defend itself is, where Europe's capacity to control or to channel critical resources, either energy, critical raw materials, space resources, I think on these different indicators, I would rate Europe at a 5-ish. In terms of aspiration, statements, ideas, intentions that you see in Brussels or in key European capitals, I will move the needle a bit higher, and I will put this at 7, 7.5. But to go from mediocre to better, which was my challenge at school, so I'm very familiar with that, you really have to have a much clearer sense of purpose and will emerging from European governments. And let me give you a very concrete example, 2 concrete examples. One, European defense. I think there is not a single, with very few exceptions, European governments that disagree with the need to step up spending and building up capabilities. And you see a huge surge in European defense over the past few years that is likely to be sustained at least until the end of the decade. Why? Because European and NATO heads of states have agreed in the Hague summit that Europe and NATO should be ready for war by the end of the decade. So this keeps everybody quite focused. However, when you look at the kind of defense spending, the kind of priorities, the fact that in defense investment you still have even more than 90% of German money going for traditional platforms, combat aircraft, land vehicles, and that only a tiny portion goes for the more innovative, agile, edgy systems, you do see that there is a problem. And this problem has been put live on television, not just in Ukraine, but also during the war against Iran, where you saw the mightiest military power, one of the most advanced one, Israel, some of the richest regional countries, the Gulf countries, struggling against much cheaper asymmetric solutions that the Iranians had found. So I think we still, the intention is very good on European defense, but the execution is still far from putting Europe in a position, and I finish here, to defend itself. And we will not be able to defend against a Russian threat using tomahawks, because we cannot afford enough tomahawks to be able to basically exert conventional deterrence against Russia. There are 100 tomahawks produced a year. They cost several $millions, whilst we have to be able to signal to the Russians that we can hit with success 1,000 targets, which means you need to have thousands deep strike solutions that are readily deployable.
Okay, but talking about signaling, sending a clear signal to Moscow, Klaus, let me put this question to you. Do we understand, as Europe as a whole, that there is that the threat from Russia is imminent, and do we have this common understanding in Europe?
Honestly, I think some understand it better than others, and it has to do with your geographical location. But others could understand it as well. I mean, France has thought it's a major power in the Sahel, and who kicked it out? It was replaced by Russians. And if Ireland is thinking of its own security interests, especially when it comes to undersea cables, it has to think of Russians. And so the idea that Russia is just a challenge in the East is completely wrong. But we have to do a little bit of catching up. I mean, when you look at the map, then you see that basically Russia developed from the city-state of Moscow, which was under the Mongols still 500 years ago, and has turned from there into the biggest country with landmass on Earth. So what we are seeing now is not the exception, it's rather the continuation of a policy followed for 500 years, and that's something we absolutely can know.
And Erlend, can you tell us, because you are the expert on the ground when it comes to what not catching up will cost us. Can you tell us what's at stake if we don't get our act together? What will it cost us if Russia wins, which we, of course, do not hope at all?
Thank you, Alexandra. Yes, we launched a report yesterday, which we called Funding Victory, where we repeat a scenario estimate of basically what will it cost to Europe if Russia wins the war. What will it cost to Europe to basically equip and fund the possibility of Ukrainian victory in the war? We only see these two possibilities. We don't think there is a middle ground. There is no room for really compromise with Russia, and there probably never have been. So basically, if you compare this let's compare this with the COVID-19 pandemic. Europe spent 2% of GDP to remedy the COVID-19 pandemic. 2% of the whole economy over 2 years was basically spent on that. If we if Russia wins the war, the cost will be more or less the same. We are talking about 400 or 500 billion euros a year. So basically we'll have the same impact. If we want to really fund Ukrainian victory, you're talking about what Ukrainian need on the battlefield already and what we think they would need extra going forward, then we'll talk about 0.5% of GDP over 4 years, maybe 1% first year and then rapidly declining. So basically, waiting for the Russians to win will be 3 or 4 times more expensive to Europe. No, I'm not talking about Ukraine, Europe alone, if the Russians basically win the war. The big cost of that, of course, is the flow of refugees that will emerge. and this will have tremendous cost to Europe.
So Marketa, the question to you, it's now clear, of course, and we knew it before as well, Ukraine must win. What do we have to do to support them? Because obviously Europe does a lot, but maybe not enough.
Absolutely, thank you for the question and pleasure to be here. We need to, I think, focus a little bit more on what's going on in Europe to be able to help. Because today and in geopolitics overall, there are ongoing discussions because of Trump and because of the US and other areas that we need to spend more. And does this country spend 3%? Does this country spend 5%? And on what? Is it tanks? Is it drones? Is it efficient? And those are very important discussions. But we are sort of forgetting about one very important thing, and that we all are living in democracies, and in the worst state, democracies are extremely fragile. And if there is one area where Russia is blatantly winning the war currently, is the disinformation area. And what it is for, if Germany buys the best Iron Domes, if AfD will be the one deciding when to implement that. What is it for if we have France's nuclear umbrella when Le Pen will be the one with the red button? You know, and I'm quite afraid of that because, okay, we are happy to RIP Viktor Orban, probably, but this is an ongoing process, the slow rise, let's say, the poisoning our societies through disinformation. There will be citizens, and there are already now voters who are starting to get algorithmically radicalized against Ukraine. And then whatever we decide here in these homes, in these houses, in these places, one day we will be democratically replaced by those who sponsored, and Moscow massively sponsored, this radicalization. So we need to focus on that, and let me tell you, we are not focusing on that. Coming from European Parliament, we had a hearing with Commissioner who was responsible for fighting disinformation. He presented us not a legislation, he presented us something completely pointless, which was not even legislation, and out of 20 minutes explaining it, he spent 12 minutes of apologizing to disinformators that it is not hampering freedom of speech. The disinformators will say it anyway. So why is he apologizing? Why is he not properly implementing it? So that's what we need to do for Ukraine too. And also, Ukraine is for us in this regard a little bit of a mirror, not a cornerstone as is described in this panel. It's a mirror of what truly fighting and dying for European values look like. Currently, it sounds like Europe is sort of, enjoying the civilization without paying the subscription fee. So I think we should get more inspired in Ukraine for that.
Thank you. Aron, we know Europe is diverse. There are different parties who have different opinions. Your party is a nationalist party, so Sweden first, I would understand. But how do you reconcile this, and correct me if I'm wrong, but how do you reconcile this position with the need for European identity or unity in order to move forward, to be maybe one day at that point when that we have a union of defense to be stronger together?
Well, thank you, and thank you for having me. I would like to start to say that the headline of this seminar, which was Europe Return to History, is interesting since, as we all know, one thing is always for certain, that it's that history has a tendency to repeat itself. And I believe that from a Swedish perspective, what we really need to come to terms with on a European level is that we still have regulatories, we have an administrative culture, we have a bureaucracy, we have several mechanisms in our countries, also in Sweden, that are from peacetime thinking. And we haven't changed our mindset due to a new reality. And is there anything that actually needs to be a wake-up call for all of us, if anything, would be that reality and war changes much faster than doctrines. And there's no coincidence that in Sweden we are united. To answer your first part of the question, among all 8 parties in the parliament, from left to right, from National Conservative Party as my own to the leftists, in the support for Ukraine. And that's not only of a theoretical way of thinking that we need to strengthen the security and the deterrence and the defense of our neighborhood or of Europe. That is due to our history, where we know this kind of warfare that Russia is waging against Ukraine, the kind of terror, the kind of war crimes, the kind of very cynical way of thinking of civilian lives. We have seen it at our borders as well during history, and a lot of other countries has as well in this room. And is there anything that we should try to work on together to strengthen the deterrence and the defense of Europe in general? It is to not be blind for that we have perhaps sometimes differences in ideological matters or in domestic policy or so on and so forth, but we have a much higher goal, which is to create a future for our children and their children. I would say that we also should try to. We are masters, many of us here, to give a beautiful speech in beautiful rooms and to declare doctrines. But what we should really try to do is also to put the unique assets, the unique capabilities of our own countries to the European table to see how we complement each other and how we are able to not to duplicate each other's capabilities and assets. Because what you also mentioned earlier, we are sometimes the need for ramping up the defense industry, the need for rearm Europe is of course high, and it is prioritized. But we also need to be to have a strategical way of thinking and be tactical in this movement. I'm not, and I would say that we put a lot of attention to the current administration in Washington with good reasons. We have also been very clear on that we cannot have an ally that are threatening other allies, not least in our own immediate neighborhood in the cause of Greenland, but also in the cause of Ukraine. But we need to understand that the transatlantic link and the transatlantic relation is much bigger, it has a longer history, and it's much more important for the future than the current administration. So we need to work together still, also with the Americans.
Nicholas, you published a book with the title Our War, Crime and Oblivion, The Need for Strategic Thinking, which is great for a panel. But the question to you is also what was just mentioned, the US. Despite the history, they do not seem like a reliable partner anymore. What's your take on that?
Yes, absolutely. I fully agree with that. And I think that, first of all, let's be very clear, the US is not an ally anymore. I will say that with Trump's administrations, the US is an enemy, because we have a full collision right now between Trump's US and Russia. It's an ideological collision. Neither Russia, nor China, nor Iran, nor South Korea, nor the US right now is basically in favor of international law. Trump's administrations just turn a blind eye to the war crimes, crimes against humanity, crime of genocide, and crime of aggressions perpetrated by Russia in Ukraine. And in fact that we have certainly with other allies, with Canada, with Japan, with South Korea, with Taiwan, with Australia, and some other countries, also some countries of the South, to build a kind of alliance, because we have to confront major threats which are, before everything else, ideological threats. And when we see the US right now just standing with Russia in the will to destroy the very unity and the very principles on which Europe is standing, we could be afraid of that. But let's be very clear on other things. Of course, we have Trump's administrations. But if we want to have the long-term view, just remember what Obama was not doing in 2014. Remember also 2013, after the chemical attack on Ghouta, with the never enforced red lines. Remember also the full withdrawal of American troops from Afghanistan without any, I will say, consultation of the allies. And I am old enough, coming quite often to Ukraine, to remember that there was a joke, in Ukraine 3 years or 2 years ago, saying the people that the Ukrainian people hated the most. And at that time, the answer was, of course, the first one was Putin, but the second one was Jake Sullivan. This was a common joke. Because, no, we are absolutely committed to protect Ukraine, to defend Ukraine, to fight for Ukraine. And at that time, there was still the illusions that there could be some compromises with Russia. And I think that the problem is, just imagine that you have Russia attacking, let's say, Estonia or Latvia or Lithuania or any other countries. What will the US do? So basically, the whole security of Europe, starting with Ukraine, relies on European hands. It means that we have not only to defend the principles, and I am very happy that most of the European countries now basically defend the principles of a special tribunal to judge the criminals responsible for the crimes of aggression, which is the crime of leaderships. But we have certainly to acknowledge that we cannot win the war, that I labeled all war, without fighting it. In history, no war was ever won if we refuse to fight it. And I think that there will be, one day or another, there will be, a true resolve of the European countries to say, well, we have to engage in the war. And we have certainly, the president, the prime minister, head of state of government of the European Union will have certainly to explain that to their people. That's where we are right now. And last but not least, that's my last words on this. First of all, and I fully agree with what has been said, there must be a plan for victory. There could be no peace deal with Russia. There could be no compromises with Russia. All the negotiations, theaters, are just a shadow theater. And if we consider that the reality, we must stop the cognitive dissonance, saying, okay, we stand with Ukraine, we help Ukraine, okay, that's good, but on the other hand, we have to bring peace. No, I think peace is a word right now that we must not hear. Of course, we are all standing for peace. This peace right now is something that must come and that will come only after Russia's full defeat, which means the withdrawal of Russian troops from the territories of Ukraine. And that must be our commitment, that must be our goals, that must be our resolve.
But without the US, Fabrice, can we do it on our own as Europe?
I think there are 2 points here to answer this question. First, already Europe, if you put the European plus UK together, cannot defend itself more than a week, 10 days, in terms of inventory, in terms of missiles. We have plenty of combat aircraft. We have pretty good navy, but we don't have enough things to throw at the adversary. So there's a real problem of inventory that even the US, as we saw, is struggling with in Iran. So I think Europe is still very far from being able to confront an adversary as Russia. That's first thing. Second, on a much bigger scale, more kind of longer term, because I think this could be solved, provided we spend in the right places, more innovative, lower cost, more agile. We solve the mass and edge question that is basically our adversaries are putting to us. But on the longer term, I think Europe needs to adopt a much more resource-centric strategy, meaning we need to be much better, as the US is, as China is, as India is, at acquiring resources, critical resources. So it's natural resources. When we don't have them, we should be much better at transforming them. The fact that we don't have a lot of critical raw materials on European soil should not be the reason for not having refining capacity. We are not able to refine the lithium that could be bought from Chile or Australia into battery-grade equipment. So we are entirely dependent not just on the raw materials, but on the transformation from China. The same in space. If you don't have better control and better management of spectrum and orbit resources, you can have as good launchers like Ariane 6 is, you don't have much to launch in space because you are going to be denied, mostly by the United States, but also China, access and at-scale operation in space. Then to finish, I think we also need on fiscal resources. We are still relying on too little borrowing at the EU level. There are some political obstacles to that, mostly in Germany and a few other Northern European countries, but also because we have not completed the fiscal union. So we are dependent on a budget that is generated by the member state, but we are still not willing to borrow more like our main competitors, the United States, the Chinese, and to finish. And we need to complement this with more creative solutions. For example, a sovereign wealth fund of 500 billion that could be co-financed by member states, the European Commission, and the private sector, private capital, to put real European money in critical sectors like defense, energy transition. So we need to be much better at the resource strategy. All the rest is statement and rhetoric.
But there are some interesting and creative initiatives and ways of spending money. For instance, in Germany, they can spend a lot of money on defense now. Klaus, could you tell us what's your assessment of what kind of role Germany could play, or because we've been talking a lot about the lack of leadership in Europe. So maybe if it's not Germany, who could be helpful in making sure that Europe will spend more on defense, that will be efficient spending, and that will catch up with other competitors?
Yeah, maybe before I get to this, a comment to the previous question. Europe can defend itself if it integrates Ukraine, because Ukraine is also Europe. You know, we don't have Europe and Ukraine. Ukraine is part of Europe. So if we think European defense together with Ukraine, suddenly we have the answer, because Ukraine is already doing a formidable job here. And so what does it mean in practice? We are not sure anymore that we have a rapid reaction force coming in from the United States. 100,000 we were thinking in the past. But maybe Ukraine could become our rapid reaction force, together with the European Union. And suddenly life looks very differently. So we have to think differently, not us, Russia and Ukraine is somehow in another planet. We have to think Ukraine as part of Europe, and then the world looks very differently. And when you ask the question on Germany, I'm a German. I would always regard myself principally also as a European. As the biggest country, if you want to lead, you have to understand the others. Which is why the United States are currently losing their leadership function. Because if you say America first, you're basically saying, I don't hear you anymore. I just listen to my own interests. So the vision I have of Germany is that Germany has to understand that the European interest is also the German interest. So it has to be the federator. And I'm a member of the CDU party, German Christian Democrats, and they have decided in February to want a European Security Council to decide with qualified majority, presided by the President of the European Council. If that would not only be in the party program but happen in practice and being taken over on the European level, we would have the start of an answer of a capable European decision-making system.
Erlend, what does it cost us if we are not smart enough in integrated Ukraine? Because they want to be member of the European Union, and I don't see any offers yet to really say and commit to saying, yes, we want you in. You will become a member in 2027. We're talking about other models that are not very welcome here.
Yeah, I think the main obstacle, of course, to in the end of today, Ukraine actually joining the EU, of course, is the war. And I think it's very... I think the situation in Europe now, the reason why Europe is not acting strategically is because Europe doesn't have a strategy. And to have a strategy, you have to have a goal. And this goal, in my view and others' view, can only be that Ukraine wins the war. This is very frightening to Europeans, because the flip side of Ukraine winning the war is that there is some defeat inflicted on Russia in the war. And this seems frightening to many, and I think this is the reason why Europe is not really funding Ukraine's war effort. So, if we don't inflict a defeat on Russia in this war, we will have to do it in the next war, and the next war will take place further west. The cost of that, this goes, of course, this is self-evident from an economic perspective, but the thing is that there is no trade-off between Europe's security and Ukraine's security. And as Europeans, we could just as well spend our defense budget on Ukraine's defense budget as on our own, because this security of Europe and Ukraine is intrinsically and totally intertwined.
Marketa, should we spend our defense budget on Ukraine, all of it?
Well, spending it on Ukraine, what does it mean? Does it mean if
Ukraine defense?
If we buy the Iron Domes and export them to Ukraine, or if we keep them here, but also use it as a deterrence, if we include Ukraine in any way or form in our nuclear umbrellas, absolutely, we should do that, because Ukraine is the forefront of all the fighting, which might be transferred to us. And I really liked what in one of the previous panels, General from NATO said, in terms of this is not a question of if Russia attacks Baltics, and it's not a matter of Moscow's decision. It needs to be reminded that it is a matter of Beijing's decision, also, very much so, and it's when, not if. And with this in mind, there can be many ways, and I'm very happy to react to also a few things that were mentioned already on this panel, where we can include Ukraine more in our own defense. We don't have to wait for accession. Okay, accession talks are complicated, we all know that, but we can have, pre-accession industrial involvement of Ukraine's defense industry. There can be involvement of Ukrainian startups, which brought immense innovation into defense, into European procurement mechanisms. That can be a start. We also shouldn't leave, sorry Klaus, we can talk about it bilaterally, but European Security Council to be led by anyone from the European Council, it should be led by Ukraine, and Ukrainian people, because they are at the forefront. They know what's up with defense and what we need. And last but not least, there has been also, I think from Nicolas, mention about the plan for victory, and I just want to mention we already have two plans on the table, and first is make Russia pay, and second is make Russia small again.
Aron, as we sit right here, the European leaders are in Cyprus, and they also reportedly want to talk about the Article 42, I think it's the 42.7. We have to be precise. And mutual defense course for the European Union. Is that something that makes sense to extend it, to focus on it in the future?
Well, in many ways it makes a lot of sense, since, and I want to echo also what the colleagues in the panel said about, because due to the view of thinking of the war in Ukraine, this is not, the kind of neo-Stalinistic, imperialistic regime that we have in Kremlin, threatening all of Europe in the war they're waging against Ukraine, is not a matter of Ukraine. This is a matter of collective security. We've all been talking about this. And in that regard, just to connect this with the previous question also, is it wise to spend the defense budget on the defense of Ukraine, for example? Yes, because this is not a war between Russia and Ukraine. This is a war about from a neo-Stalinistic imperialistic regime that wants to determine the faith of us other European countries as well, to withdraw national sovereignty, self-determination, freedom, and the way of ourselves choose our way of living and our way of having our defense. So we need to, in many ways, strengthen the European autonomy, because this is what I meant earlier also with putting the unique assets and the unique capabilities from each other countries to the European table, that we have, like, it was no coincidence that Sweden, for example, chose 2022 to join NATO and to be full-fledged members, and were accepted as full-fledged members of NATO, because the mind had shifted from that security and defense is a matter of a national decision and a national domestic issue to this is something that we need to deepen the cooperation in a European level. And I would like just also to say that we need to do that in a way that still make Europe reliable, and that the credibility and the trustworthy and trustness of Europe and the European Union is still there, and we do not in too serious way create a new federalistic state or supreme power that also withdraw decision making from the national parliament. So this has to be a very close dialogue between the national decision makers, the governments, and of course the European level, because that's also a way to explain this to all our voters, to all the domestic publics, that this is something we are creating together to strengthen our deterrence. And I just want to point out perhaps that one thing that we do not have and where we really need to strengthen the European deterrence is the unconventional or the nuclear deterrence, because this is very sensitive to talk about, but we cannot be reliable and dependent on the nuclear umbrella that is in the hands of the current US administration, for example. And I'm welcoming the French initiative, for example, to try to keep a dialogue with other countries as well. Sweden is one among them, to be able to see if we can complement and also to add better capabilities to the NATO nuclear sharing program, to be able to also create this kind of deterrence for ourselves, in addition to the conventional defense like missile systems and be better on the drone warfare and so on and so forth, which is our best educators and our best experts is the Ukrainian armed forces and the Ukrainian people. So they're the one we should thank.
But Nicolas, of course, talking about nuclear deterrence, this is going to take maybe decades to be less dependent on the US. So it is quite not very likable or very realistic option for now, right? Or what's your take on that?
I think that, of course, that's I mean, in my view, a credible option, but also we have to be very clear on the fact that we have absolutely no other options. I think we have certainly, and that was also part of the proposal made by my own president, Emmanuel Macron, we have to reinforce, of course, we have to share not the ultimate decision, which is just impossible, but we have to share, I mean, common analysis, common strategy, to have some common drills on nuclear deterrence. That's something that we have certainly to reinforce with France, of course, but also with the UK UK, because I don't think that there is a full credibility, not only, I mean, during Trump administration, but for the decades to come, you know, on the US. But the second point, which is in my view more important, is of course we have to create the instruments of a credible, of course, conventional deterrence. Because let's imagine that you have an attack, you know, on the Baltic states by Russia. I mean, the question is not if we will use or not nuclear deterrence or nuclear weapons. The question is there will be a readiness. You will have enough, you know, mobility of the troops just to protect, let's say, Estonia, Latvia, or to protect Finland or any other countries. I mean, that's something which is immediate, I mean, task that we have to do. The third thing is that we have certainly, we are facing, I mean, three urgent questions. One could sound metaphysical, but that's the question of the historical consciousness of Europe. No, I think Ukraine is embodying the historical consciousness of Europe. And we have certainly to create this consciousness among the other people. The second question is basically about, you know, Russia's future. You were talking, there is no strategy, you know, in the European capitals, nor in DC, Washington, D.C., but I think we must have a strategy regarding Russia. Russia is here to stay, unfortunately, but they will be never our friend. So we have certainly to create the conditions not only to contain Russia, but to create the opportunity to roll back. And the question of make Russia small again, I fully agree with that. I mean, that's a true question, so we must not fear Russia's defeat. We have to fear, I mean, a power still able in Russia to create insecurity. And the third question is the future of NATO? Yeah. And that's, I mean, the elephant in the room right now. Because if we don't have, you know, the US being a credible partner or credible member of NATO, we have, first of all, with Ukraine, of course, with other countries, to create another security organizations, which is neither EU security and defense common policy, nor NATO. And I mean, it's an urgent task, and we have to think about that.
Fabrice, you wanted to add something, but if it's possible, briefly, because I have one last question. We have only 6 minutes left, so...
No, it was just to respond to this, that indeed neither NATO nor the EU are fully fit for purpose. And whilst we have to accept imperfection in life, it's not good enough when you are facing the kind of challenges and threats that we are. So we are somehow stuck with old frameworks and are trying to tweak them at the edges. And by the time we've done or failed to do so, I think the world has moved on. So there is a real question of whether Europe is still part of history or getting on the sideline. And I think here it will take probably more crisis and more failure to realize that we do need indeed a new broader coalition, not ad hoc coalition, not a narrow one, but a new coalition for European security, where we bring the most willing Northern European, Baltic, including, I think, Canada, Turkey, and obviously Ukraine. And this is how you start having something that is more agile, but also more robust.
We talk a lot today about how to change the posture of Europe, how to help Ukraine. But of course, Ukraine is bringing a lot to the table in terms of military advances or technologies, in terms of resilience. So my last question to all of you, please, just with one sentence. What can we learn from Ukraine and how can we implement it into our European strategy? Do you want to start, Erlend, or should I start with Klaus?
I think the European Union has assured the financing of Ukraine for the next 2 years. And at the end of this process, Ukraine might become a net security exporter, as it has done and shown already in the Gulf.
First of all, Ukraine is an incredible nation because I think that right now is the main security provider of Europe, but also the main security provider of the security for the security of the world. And the second thing is that basically I think Ukraine will prevail, not because it's wishful thinking, but that's not rational, that's just rational thinking. And we have to create in Europe all the very reasons for which Ukraine is winning. That basically it is showing us the lead and the way.
Fabrice, yeah?
Maybe it's a negative lesson, but for me, the big one is the failure of deterrence has huge consequences demographically, geographically, that are irreversible. Therefore, on the Europeans, you need to harden up a bit and invest much more in much sharper deterrence, because if Russian forces cross the line in the Baltic, the cost to push them back will be enormous for democracies like European democracies. So better invest in deterrence than in defense and counteroffensive. Thanks.
Lessons learned?
Yes, what can we learn from Ukraine? I will somehow combine it with a reaction to what my colleague from Sweden was mentioning. Of course, for me, he's a nationalist, I'm a Eurofederalist, so it was a hard listen. Can I make it any more obvious? But I think that from Ukraine, in this regard, we can truly learn what it means to be patriotic and nationalistic without seizing the European cooperation and European project, because we need each other together. We cannot pretend that we can do it on the lowest possible level, and that we also protect our culture, our humor, our recipes, our songs on the lowest possible level, but it can be protected under the European umbrella. And we can see that truly nationalistic and patriotic country with people dying for its values on its borders is also standing for the common European project. And we should find out how is that possible.
Aron, what can we learn from Ukraine and how can we implement it into our new strategy?
Well, I fully agree with the previous speaker. And this is what I mean by that this issue is much bigger than, and it's cross-party borders, cross nations within Europe as well. We are on the same page in many ways in this decisive moment and in this very important fact. But all glory to Ukraine. The most important thing is perhaps the incredible way that what we can learn is the way Ukrainians and the Ukrainian armed forces, but also the innovative hubs and the new the engineers creating these new technologies to beat the Russians. This is something that we should learn. We have already moved from just donation to also production together with Ukraine, for example, in the defense industry within Ukraine. But now we need to move from that to also connect startups, innovative ideas between our countries and try to develop the new kind of warfare against Russia from point one. So that's perhaps the most crucial point, to mention one.
Erlend, what's your take?
Yeah, thank you. I was out on the battlefield this week for several days, and I ended up speaking with my friend in Da Vinci Wolves. We basically discussed Russia's history and what kind of country Ukraine is up to. And what we can learn from Ukraine, I think, is that Russia is here to eradicate and from the surface of the air the Ukrainian nation. But not only the Ukrainian nation. If you read what Putin actually writes, he thinks that the former Soviet Union, let's include Estonia, Latvia, etc., this is in reality part of the Russian culture, the Ruski Mir, and all of these people should be aligned under Russian language. And basically, what we can learn for Ukraine is that there is no way, in the short run at least, that you can compromise with this strategic adversary. They will not yield, they will not stop, and if we don't inflict the necessary defeat on Russia here, then we will have to inflict it further west. Thank you.
On that note, thank you very much for your attention. Thank you to my panelists. Great insights.